I did not say a word. I did not walk out. I sat back down at that table, picked up my fork, and took another bite of the salmon my daughter had ordered without asking what I wanted. That was the moment I knew exactly what I was going to do. Let me back up. My name is not important. What's important is that I turned 67 last November, and I have spent the better part of 4 decades building something worth having. A good career, a house that's paid off, a savings account that would make most people my age feel lucky, and a daughter I raised alone after her mother left when she was 9 years old. Just the two of us, for most of her childhood. I packed her lunches. I sat through every school concert, every parent-teacher interview, every Saturday morning hockey game she dragged me to, even though I never understood the sport. I drove 4 hours each way to move her into university. Twice, because she switched programs. I didn't complain once. Her name is Tara. She married a man named Fletcher 3 years ago. Fletcher works in finance. He wears watches that cost more than my first car and has opinions about wine that he shares whether you ask or not. He's not cruel. Exactly. He's just the kind of man who makes you feel like you're slightly inconveniencing him by existing in the same room. They live in a condo downtown Toronto, 32nd floor, the kind of building with a concierge and a waiting list for the parking spots. Tara sent me photos when they moved in. I told her it was beautiful. It is beautiful. It also has not a single photograph of me anywhere on the walls. I noticed that the first time I visited, I told myself it was because they'd just moved in. That was 18 months ago. My birthday was on a Thursday. Tara called 2 weeks before and said she wanted to take me out to dinner, just the three of us, somewhere nice. I was touched. Genuinely. I went out and bought a new shirt, dark blue, the kind with the small collar. I got a haircut. I told my neighbor Phyllis I had birthday plans with my daughter, and she said, "That's lovely, Harold." And I felt, for a moment, like a man whose life had turned out fine. Fletcher had made a reservation at a restaurant I'd never heard of, the kind of place where the menu has no prices on the version they hand to the guest of honor. I only realized this halfway through dinner when Tara ordered a second bottle of something and Fletcher didn't flinch. They gave me a card. Tara had signed it with a little heart. Fletcher had signed it. Best, Fletcher. Which I thought was a strange thing to write in a birthday card, but said nothing. Inside the card was a gift card. $67 to a grocery store chain I don't particularly like, but that happens to be close to my house. Tara said, "We know you're practical, Dad," and smiled like she'd done something thoughtful. Fletcher picked up the card from my side of the table to look at it. He nodded like he was assessing it. Then he set it down on his side of the table and didn't give it back for the rest of the meal. That is such a small thing. I know it's a small thing, but something about watching him hold my birthday gift card like it had been given to him, something about that particular small thing settled into my chest and stayed there. Dinner went on. They talked about their upcoming trip to Portugal. They talked about a renovation they were planning for the second bedroom. They talked about Fletcher's bonus and what they were going to do with it. I listened. I asked questions. I was, I think, a pleasant dinner companion. At some point, Tara said, "Dad, we actually wanted to talk to you about something." I put down my fork. She looked at Fletcher. He looked at her. Then he cleared his throat and said, "We've been doing some thinking about the house. My house. The house I've lived in for 31 years. The house where Tara grew up, where her bedroom still has the dent in the wall from when she threw a textbook during an argument in grade 10, where the backyard still has the outline of the garden her mother planted before she left, and that I maintained every summer because Tara said she liked seeing it. The house that is, at current market value, worth approximately $1.3 million. A number I know because I had it appraised last spring for reasons entirely unrelated to this conversation." Fletcher said, "We were thinking, with the market the way it is, and with you rattling around in all that space on your own, it might be worth thinking about your options." I said, "My options?" Tara said, "We just think it might make more sense for you to be somewhere smaller, easier to manage. And if you sold, you could free up a lot of equity." I said, "Free it up for what?" Another look between them. Fletcher said, "Well, we've been looking at some investment opportunities, and we thought, with your support, we could potentially..." You want me to sell my house, I said, and give you the money. Tara said, not give, Dad. It would be a family investment. You'd still benefit. Where would I live? She said there were some very nice retirement communities. She'd done research. She showed me something on her phone. A brochure, essentially. Activities. A dining room. A shuttle bus to the mall on Wednesdays. I am 67 years old. I run 5 kilometers 3 times a week. I volunteer at the library on Tuesday afternoons. I have a mortgage-free house with a backyard and a gas fireplace, and a neighbor named Phyllis who brings me soup when I have a cold. I am not a shuttle bus to the mall on Wednesdays, man. I looked at that brochure for a long moment. Then I looked at my daughter. She was watching me with an expression I recognized. It was the same expression she used to get when she was 17 and wanted to borrow the car and had already decided she was taking it. A kind of preemptive patience. Like she was waiting for me to catch up to a conclusion she'd already reached. I thought about the house. I thought about the backyard. I thought about Phyllis. I thought about the grocery store gift card sitting on Fletcher's side of the table. I said, "Let me think about it." Tara smiled. Fletcher nodded and signaled to the waiter for the check. I excused myself to use the restroom and stood in the bathroom of this very expensive restaurant for 4 minutes, looking at myself in the mirror over a sink that had no visible taps, just a motion sensor, which I had to wave my hand under 3 times before water came out. I am not a dramatic man. I don't make scenes. I spent my entire working life in municipal planning, which is about as undramatic a field as exists, and I am good at sitting with information and deciding what to do with it slowly and carefully. That is what I did, standing in that bathroom. By the time I washed my hands and walked back out, I had decided. I just wasn't going to tell them that yet. The drive home took 40 minutes. I put on the radio, something classical, and I thought very clearly and very calmly about everything I knew. I knew that the house was in my name alone, always had been. I knew that I had a lawyer, a man named Gus I've used for 20 years, who is thorough and discreet. I knew that Tara had been calling me more frequently in the past 2 months than she had in the previous year combined. I had noticed this, and told myself it was because she missed me. I am a man who prefers to believe good things about his daughter. I knew that Fletcher had been laid off from his firm in September. Tara had mentioned it briefly, minimizingly, in a phone call. She'd said he was transitioning. I'd asked to what, and she'd said, just, exploring options. I hadn't pushed. I knew that the renovation they were planning for the second bedroom, the one they'd talked about over dinner like it was, nothing would cost, conservatively, $80,000 to $100,000. I put all of these things together in the order they belonged, and I sat with what they made. When I got home, I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table, the one I've had for 22 years, the one with the ring stain on the left corner from a mug of coffee. I sat down too fast the morning I found out my mother had died. I looked at my kitchen. My window above the sink with the small herb pots Tara gave me 2 Christmases ago, the ones she'd forgotten she'd given me because she asked last Christmas if I wanted herb pots. I called Gus the next morning. Gus is the kind of lawyer who does not ask unnecessary questions. I told him I wanted to understand concretely and completely what protections existed around my home, what would need to happen for someone else to make any claim on it, what I needed to have in place to ensure that remained impossible. He walked me through everything. It took 2 appointments. At the end of the second one, he said, "Harold, you're completely protected. No one can touch that house without your explicit consent, in writing, witnessed, and notarized." I said, "Good." He said, "Is there something specific prompting this?" I said, "Just being thorough." He nodded in the way that meant he understood exactly what was prompting this and respected me enough not to say so. I also, in those 2 weeks, did several other things. I updated my will. My estate, including the house, will now pass to 3 beneficiaries, 20% to Tara, 60% to a scholarship fund. I set up, through the library, where I volunteer, and 20% to my nephew Gareth, who is 24 and studying environmental science, and who remembers my birthday without being reminded and calls me sometimes just to talk. I opened a new account at a different bank, one that Tara doesn't know about, because the account she does know about the one I've had since she was a child, the one where I once, foolishly, added her as a contact, just in case I transferred the bulk of my savings out of. And then I called Tara. I told her I'd been thinking. I told her the idea made me a little nervous, but that I was open to discussing it further. I told her maybe she and Fletcher could come to the house for dinner, so we could talk it through properly. She sounded relieved. She sounded warm. She sounded like my daughter. They came the following Saturday. I made roast chicken. I'm a good cook. I learned out of necessity when Tara was young, and I've kept at it because I enjoy it. I set the table properly. Cloth napkins, the good plates. I opened a bottle of red wine that was better than anything we'd had at that restaurant. They arrived, and Fletcher looked around my living room with the particular expression of a man doing calculations. His eyes moved along the walls, to the fireplace, to the windows that look out onto the backyard. He said, "Great space, Harold." Not a compliment. An appraisal. Tara hugged me and said the house smelled good. We ate. I asked about Portugal. I asked about Fletcher's job search. I let them talk. I refilled their glasses. I was the perfect host, the accommodating father, the reasonable older man who just needed some reassurance before coming around to a sensible idea. After the plates were cleared, Fletcher put his elbows on my kitchen table, the table with the coffee ring, and said, "So, have you had a chance to think more seriously about what we discussed?" I said, "I have." I got up and went to the sideboard, the one in the corner of the dining room where I keep the good scotch and the documents I don't need often. I took out a folder. I brought it back to the table and set it in front of them. Fletcher reached for it. I put my hand flat on top of it. I said, "Before we go through this, I want to make sure we're all clear on a few things." I told them, in the same steady voice I used for 30 years in planning meetings, that I had met with my lawyer, that I had reviewed the title and all documentation related to the property, that I had, while doing so, also revisited my financial planning more broadly. Tara said, "Okay, that sounds good, Dad. That's smart." I opened the folder. The first document was the updated will. I slid it across the table and let them read it. I watched Fletcher's face as he got to the part about the scholarship fund. I watched something shift behind his eyes, a small, rapid recalculation. Tara said, "Dad, this is you. Changed your will." I updated it. I said, "Yes." "The library? I volunteer there every Tuesday. They do good work." Fletcher said, "This seems like something you might want to revisit." In terms of the overall structure, the second document, I said, is a letter from my financial advisor confirming that my liquid assets have been reorganized and are no longer held in the account you have contact information for. Silence. Tara said, "What does that mean?" "It means the account you knew about no longer has significant funds in it," I said. "If that information had ever been passed to anyone else, which I'm not suggesting, it would no longer be accurate." Fletcher set down the will. He looked at me. I looked back at him pleasantly. "The third document," I said, "is not for you. It's for me. It's a note I made myself about the dinner 2 weeks ago, the things that were said, the retirement community brochure, the gift card. I left that one in the folder." Tara's voice had gone very quiet. She said, "Dad, we were just trying to help." I said, "I know. We're worried about you. In this big house on your own." "Tara," I said, "I love you. I want to say that first and mean it, because I do. You are the thing in my life I'm most proud of. Not the house, not the savings. You." She had tears starting. "But I need you to understand something," I said. "This house is my home. It was my home before you were born, and it will be my home for as long as I am healthy and capable of living in it. If that changes, I will make that decision myself, with my doctor and my lawyer and my own good judgment. Not over salmon and a grocery store gift card." Fletcher opened his mouth. I said, "Fletcher, I'm going to ask you to let me finish." He closed it. I told them that I had no interest in punishing anyone, that the will could always be revisited depending on how things went, that I hoped we could continue to have a relationship that was worth having, that I would like, very much, to remain a part of their lives, but that I was also not confused anymore about what the past few months had been, and that I needed them to know that I was not. Tara cried. Fletcher looked at the table. I poured myself the last of the wine. After a while, Tara said, "I didn't realize how it looked." I said, "I think you did, a little bit." She didn't argue with that. Fletcher said, Eventually, I want you to know I respect you, Harold. His voice had lost whatever smooth surface it usually kept. I said, I'd like to believe that. We sat for a few more minutes. Then they left. Tara hugged me at the door, longer than usual, her face pressed into my shoulder, the way she used to when she was small. I held on, and didn't say anything. When they were gone, I washed the dishes. I dried them and put them away. I wiped down the table, the one with the ring stain in the corner. Then I went and sat in the living room and called Gareth. He picked up on the second ring. I told him I'd had an interesting couple of weeks. He said, "Yeah? What happened?" And I told him, "Not everything. The broad shape of it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Are you okay, Uncle Harold?" I thought about that honestly. "Yes," I said. "Actually, I am. That was 7 months ago. Tara and I have had dinner 4 times since. Just the two of us, twice. She's been different. Not perfectly different. She's still her mother's daughter in some ways I can't do anything about, but different. She asked about the library. She asked about Phyllis. She came over in March and we planted the first round of seeds in the backyard garden, the one from the outline her mother left behind, and she stayed for 3 hours, and neither of us said anything important, and it was, somehow, one of the better afternoons I've had in years. Fletcher is working again. A different firm. He's been, from a distance, tolerable. The house still has no photos of me in it, but Tara sent me one last month. Us. At the garden. She said she'd framed it. I haven't seen it hanging yet, but I believe her. The grocery store gift card, by the way, is still on my sideboard. $67. I haven't used it. I don't know why I've kept it. Maybe because every time I see it, sitting there in its little envelope, I remember the dinner, and the bathroom with the invisible taps, and the drive home with the classical music, and the moment I sat at my kitchen table and decided that 67 years was long enough to spend being reasonable about the wrong things. Maybe I'll use it eventually. Or maybe some things are just worth keeping exactly where they are. I've been thinking, these past few months, about what it actually takes to hold on to yourself when someone you love is trying, gently, and with good intentions they half believe, to take something from you. It doesn't announce itself. That's the part nobody warns you about. It doesn't come through the door loud. It comes in over salmon. It comes in a brochure, with photographs of smiling people on a shuttle bus. It comes in the particular patience of someone who has already decided what's going to happen and is just waiting for you to arrive at the same place. What I had to find, sitting in that restaurant bathroom, waving my hand under a tap that couldn't be bothered to work properly, was not anger. Anger would have been easier. Anger would have let me make a scene, say something I couldn't take back, blow the whole thing apart in a way that felt satisfying for about 4 minutes. I've seen men do that. I've watched them feel righteous for a week and alone for the rest of their lives. What I needed was something steadier, clarity maybe. The willingness to see what was actually happening instead of what I wanted to be happening. That's harder than anger. It requires you to sit with an uncomfortable truth that someone you raised, someone you love without condition, had been looking at your home and your savings and calculating, and not let that truth make you cruel or small. Fletcher didn't make me cruel. Tara's careful patience at that dinner table didn't make me small. What they made me was awake. And I am grateful for that even now, in a way I couldn't have predicted. I think about what I did in the weeks after. The lawyer appointments, the account, the will. People might hear that and think it was revenge. It wasn't. It was, honestly, just the work of a man who had finally decided to take his own life as seriously as other people were taking it. That's not a dramatic thing. It shouldn't be. But for a lot of us people who spent decades being reasonable, accommodating, making things easier for everyone around them, it turns out to be harder than it sounds. The part that stayed with me most wasn't the dinner, or the folder on the table, or even Tara's face when she read the updated will. It was Gareth, picking up on the second ring. 24 years old, in the middle of his own life, and he just said, "Are you okay, Uncle Harold?" Like it was the most natural thing, like he had time. You find out who people are not in the big moments, but in the ordinary ones. A birthday card signed Best, Fletcher. A gift card held on the wrong side of the table. A phone call answered on the second ring. I don't believe that people who do careless things to others are necessarily bad people. I believe they are often people who have not yet been asked to reckon with what they've done. What I gave Tara, sitting at my kitchen table with the folder between us, was not punishment. It was a reckoning, a clear mirror. And the fact that she looked at it really looked, and then came back, and came again, and showed up in March to plant seeds in the garden her mother started 30 years ago, tells me something I needed to know. The house is still mine. The garden is growing. The gift card is still on the sideboard. And I am, as I told Gareth that night and still believe, genuinely okay.